All right, welcome everybody. We've hit it. It's exactly the top of the hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started and let those who straggle in. So welcome today. We are super thrilled you had a moment to join us. We are here to talk about 3 ways you can improve your remote hiring process. So this particular session is 60 minutes long. We are recording, and we're recording in 2 ways. So we're both recording the video and audio. And if you look in the top right corner of the Zoom screen, we also are running a live transcription using Otter AI, which is capturing the text of our words. That, for those of you whose attention tends to drift off, you might find that a handy anchor. If you go, oh my gosh, they said something exciting, what was that? You need to go back and figure out the context. That's there for you. And for anybody who's having trouble with video or sound quality, the transcription is there as an anchor. At the end of our time, we'll provide all of these resources to both you and the rest of our friends who register, but maybe we're not inclined to actually show up. And for the next hour, you are welcome to unmute when you have something on topic to contribute, but otherwise keep yourself muted to minimize our background noise. And we will turn the stage over to our 2 esteemed expert guests. Today we have Johanna Rothman and Mark Kilby. Can you guys both wave so people can pick your faces out? So these folks have been running and helping remote teams for years, way before there was a pandemic to make it popular, way before everybody accepted that remote was an okay thing to do. They were helping teams work successfully remotely and onboard and hire successful team members. And so today they're going to share 3 of the key secrets to success in remote hiring that they have learned over that time. And so they know who they are sharing with. We're going to start with a quick poll and just kind of understand what your experience with remote is. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. When you think about the year ahead, what are your team's plans around remote work? Are you planning to be 100% remote? Primarily remote with a few on-site folks, maybe, mostly in the office? You know, is anybody planning to be 100% back in the office, or whatever your office kind of thing is? And finally, I know a lot of folks are still figuring that out. So it looks like we have 85% of the votes are in. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds. So we're going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see what the mix looks like. All right. So you should be seeing these results now. A heck of a lot of 100% remote. And a smidge of mostly in the office with some remote. So with this preponderance of mostly remote, we've got a lot to talk about. And with that, I will turn it over and let our friends do the talking.
Thank you. So let me get the slides up here so you can see it. And for those who want to follow along, they're also there in the link in chat for you. So I am Mark Kilby, and I have my lovely co-author, Johanna, with me today. And we are very pleased to be here with you today. And we are primarily going to focus on this picture. So there's many things to this picture. We're not going to be able to touch on everything in this picture. So we want to give you 3 elements in particular that will allow you to improve how you connect, find, and recruit those awesome remote people, because they are out there. Johanna, did you want to add to that?
I always want to add, Mark,
I know.
Mark is very generous. So, so the first thing we're going to talk about is how to involve the entire team, right? We see even in this past year that managers, well-meaning managers, want to do a lot of the work for the team, and there's something to be said for working on behalf of the team, and there's a lot yet even more to be said for when the team works together on everything. So that's the first start of the first tip. So let's talk about how we involve the entire team. Okay, so Mark actually put up the slide. Fine.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. So one of the things I think about when a lot of us think about hiring and we say, oh, we go right to the interview. But there's all kinds of planning and organizing and really figuring out how to execute before the interview and certainly the decision. So when Mark and I wrote the book From Chaos to Successful Distributed Agile Teams, we said the more you can get the entire team to work together, the more likely you are to have a successful outcome. So, Mark, do you want to say more? Because I tend to blather.
Well, so yeah, so I will actually go back to this diagram. So as Johanna said, most managers are well-meaning and trying to take a lot of this on, but really the best way to have the whole process go smoothly is to work with the team right from the start. So this is why you've got a kickoff meeting here. This is where you're getting the whole team to help you find those reasonable candidates, and also working with the team to screen the resumes and do the actual interviews. So you're involving them in as many steps as possible. And usually the first reaction I get from anyone in management is, the team doesn't have time for that. And the reaction I have is, does the team have time for dealing with getting somebody new that does not work well on the team? I have painfully dealt with those situations, spending not hours, not days, but sometimes months resolving that issue. So you actually save quite a bit of time by getting the teams involved right away. So
one of the,
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Can we go back to the picture, please, for a
Sure.
second, Mark? Because I want to highlight that the kickoff meeting and finding reasonable candidates. Notice we're talking about the team involved in finding reasonable candidates. The team has friends, right? Some of us have more friends than others. Mark and I have, laughed about my extrovertedness and the fact that everyone I ever meet is a friend, and he is more particular than that, I believe. Wouldn't you say that, Mark? That you are more particular and not everybody you ever have met is a friend?
I would say it. I'd like to engage more on ideas, and sometimes that means getting just into banter is not my thing. I am well on the introvert side, and so with that, it takes me a little while to engage on what ideas are interesting to certain individuals and to me that we can share and geek out on.
And so what that means is not that I have way more potential candidates in my network or Mark has fewer, but that Mark often has better quality potential candidates. And I have a very wide net. He probably has a narrower net, and our nets might not overlap. So the fact that the team works together on finding reasonable candidates really, really helps the team discover, who do they really want? What kinds of people do we really want? And we're going to talk about hours of overlap in a minute. But then notice that we say start the interview clock once we have those reasonable candidates and we say to review resumes, to sort into 3 piles. And yes, we recommend that the team learns how to do this. Mark related a little bit of a story before about people who are really not quite right. And that often happens when a manager includes a resume on the yes pile where it really doesn't belong on the yes pile. So when team members learn as a team how to sort through the piles, I should say through the resumes together, they learn how to take on, first of all, some of the work so they are not waiting for the manager. And secondly, what kinds of things do you really look for? That's a
Mhm.
really big deal.
You also tend to get a sense of what types of candidates work for the team overall, because you might not get all of that in the kickoff meeting. So by having the team go through these other phases, especially the sorting the resumes and go through that together, there's a solo part, but there's also a part where the team goes through it together. They start to realize, oh yes, this skill's important, or we'd really like this quality in the next set of candidates. So it's helpful for the team to discuss that. But I think, Johanna, I think we need to talk about one very important thing, and it's not really time zones, it's something else.
Hours of overlap. Yep.
Yeah. So do you want to start us off
So
on this one?
sure. So it's really hard. This is a team I coached several years ago, and you'll notice they're all in exactly the same time zone. It's the Eastern time zone. Dave is the manager. He's not available. He has other management commitments from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. Polly is the product owner. She has other commitments from noon to 2 in the afternoon. Oh, yeah, something. Um, Mark will
Close enough.
fix me if I say it right. Okay, if I say it wrong. And everybody comes into work. Uh, Comes in is a kind of a misnomer because they were remote before this, and they are fully dispersed now, as all of us are. But everybody starts work at a different time. Everybody takes lunch at a different time. So their hours of overlap vary throughout the day, right? So this is one of the reasons Mark and I don't talk about time zones, but we talk about hours of overlap. And if you look at the times of um, 10 to noon, right? 10 and 11 in the morning, and then again at 4 in the afternoon, the entire team is available to the team. Now, what's interesting is most of the team, except for Dave, is available at that 3 o'clock in the afternoon time. So it's really important to say, when is your team available? Because it's really hard to interview people if you're not um, reasonably available to each other to have conversations if you need to stop an interview or if you need to ask somebody to do something else, right? That you have a question you would like a later on interviewer to ask this question also. And if you want to review resumes as a team in real time, this particular team only has 3 hours during the day where they can review resumes. That's kind of not really enough time. Okay. Do you want to do you want to go to the next slide, please?
Sure. So with this particular team, they looked at how can we provide more hours of overlap and how can we make some adjustments. So you can see where Dave spread out some of his responsibilities to Fred and Sandra, and also they pushed all that to the end of their day. And Polly decided, actually Polly being a product manager, those outside commitments were mostly customer calls. So rather than bunching them up, she spread them out. And that gave more time overall for the entire team to participate in these activities. So now you see 1, 2, 3, 4 hours of overlap that this team can completely invest in moving the recruiting process forward. So Johanna, this is great for the team, but what about the candidates?
So it's the same problem with the candidates. If you cannot, if you have, even in the Eastern time zone, so Mark and I are earlier in the day people, right? We both like to work earlier in the day, but I don't think I'm telling any lies here. Mark tends to start work earlier than I do. So we, I am more able at the end of the day, even to write a little bit more. When we were writing the book, I would say, we could get together at 5, and he would kind of look at me and say, I'm kind of done at 5 because I started at 5 this morning. And so for him, that was way more than a full day. So while everybody has their own preferences, and we certainly flexed with each other when we needed to, we need to find people who are able to work pretty much with the team in the same team's hours of overlap. Right? Not perfect. This this team has 4 total hours of overlap and 1 really strong hour of overlap. So I would actually call this 5 hours of overlap.
Yeah.
But if you find a candidate who seems really good, but only has 2 or 3 hours of overlap, especially closer to 2, I get that feeling where I think, I think everybody
Yeah,
understands that.
yeah. And actually, Julie had a great question in chat. And Julie, rather than read the whole thing, I'm just going to summarize a little bit. So her question was around bonuses for staff recommendations. It can work for or against. So if usually the thinking behind that is, if you know great people, suggest them. And so I've been in many organizations like that. The problem is, if those great people only have 2 or 3 hours of overlap, that may not work for this team. But if you have multiple teams in your organization, can they work well for another team? So and this is a little bit more advanced, and we talk about it more in our course, but if you've got if you've got a very active bonus program, i.e., you've got employees that are really doing a great job of pulling in those great people and helping you with that part, you might have a few different teams represented on the recruiting team at first. And so I've done that where, oh, well, this person can't fit in our hours overlap, but for this other team, they would be great. Let's see if they're interested. And it's sort of a two-way interview. We would talk to them about, we know you're really interested in this team, but it may not work out. Would you be interested here? We would love to have you in the organization. So that's one alternative. All right.
And the bonus part is, I have never seen a large enough referral bonus to actually change the dynamics of the team or change the actual outcomes. So I think that's the referral bonuses for me has not yet been a problem. I'm sure there are organizations where it is, but so far
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And so Char is asking, how do you know the hours of overlap while interviewing them, just based off their time zone? Yes and no. So what we have done in some of the organizations I've been involved in is, when you do some of the initial screens, you might ask, what's your normal remote working day like? Because a big part of remote is having some choice. Now, for those of you who didn't work remote before the pandemic, you might not feel like you had a lot of choice. But for those of us who've been working remote for years, it's that choice of, when do you start your day? When do you end your day? When do you take lunch? But also making sure you are available to the rest of the team. So that's usually one of the first conversations in that screening. So yeah, okay. And so there's some other
Yeah.
comments there about bonuses. Okay, but we need to move on. So
Okay.
thanks. Great
All right.
questions though. Please keep them coming.
Yeah.
So we're kind of curious for those of you online with us. If you go to menti.com and enter this code, or if you have the link, which I'll post in there again, we're curious, how many hours of overlap would you say your team has now? So just kind of give us a rough estimate. Okay, so I see 7 to 8 hours of overlap. So that I'm guessing that's probably a team that was in an office and then might have gotten moved remote. 4 to 6 hours is probably already some people working remote. 1 to 3 hours. Yeah, that gets tough. And then less than an hour is probably somebody in the West and somebody in the Far East, I'm guessing, because that's usually what that scenario is. Makes it very tough for recruiting.
Well, it makes it hard for any kind of collaboration.
Yeah,
So,
really.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for that. Let's move on.
So the interesting thing about, well, can you go back to that just for a second, Mark?
I
I
would
don't
be
know if you
happy to.
can.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what's really interesting is if you have fewer hours of overlap, you really need to focus on what can you do asynchronously. Because if you want to have a world-spanning group, I'm not sure I would call it a team. That's there are interactions between various people. How about if I leave it at that? But if you can do a whole bunch of stuff asynchronously and keep your synchronous work very small.
Yeah. Well, so let me qualify that a little bit. So if it's more operational type of work,
Yeah.
we need to keep this running, or it's a customer support role where you might have some scripts in place or something that you've got some standard ways of responding to customer requests. And then for the more difficult ones, you have to escalate it somehow. Yeah, that can work. But when you are creating together, and we're used to
Right.
dealing with software teams, but it's not just software teams, it could be anything, but you're creating something together. It gets very difficult when you're in these lower 2 levels. So it's not just recruiting.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
I moved us.
Oh, no worries. I think we're good on time.
Yeah.
Because
Excuse
now
me.
we need to focus on behavior description questions. So could you say a little bit more about that, Johanna?
Sure. So in the course and in interviewing altogether, there are several kinds of questions, and we have found that behavior description